PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be looking into the future regarding your Vegas Golden Knights. And we are going to be discussing who should Vegas re-sign next off season. And I understand that there is going to be some time in between here and now that certain decisions are going to be made. There are players that are going to have the option of being re-signed. But for this episode, and really this episode alone, we are essentially going to be spending some time and looking at the amount of players your Vegas Golden Knights have an opportunity to re-sign for the upcoming 2025 NHL offseason. So heading into the Vegas Golden Knights, I'm going to very quickly kind of establish this. There are over a dozen players the Vegas Golden Knights have that are going to be free agents next year. And when it comes to those guys who are over a dozen, I do want to mention that you have 4 who are restricted free agents, and then you have 15 that are unrestricted free agents. And overall, when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights, they have extended some guys, they have left some guys exposed, but overall, when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, you are going to focus on over a dozen players for 2025. Now, as we get into this episode, I'm going to start out with the yes. Okay, I am going to focus on the guys that will be re-signed by your Vegas Golden Knights. And these are going to be kind of your no-brainers, the guys that are really should be your extended guys with the Vegas Golden Knights. And in my opinion, there are 3 that are an obvious no-brainer for your Vegas Golden Knights organization. Starting out, Brayden McNabb, Nabber, original misfit. That is a yes by the Vegas Golden Knights. Is going to be a very clear statement. The Vegas Golden Knights having a veteran defenseman, Alex Pietrangelo, he's a part of it. But Brayden McNabb, yes, when it comes to a contract extension and when it comes to him being extended, it was obviously a no-brainer. There was a yes on that part. And keeping a day one asset like Brayden McNabb, it just makes so much sense for the Vegas Golden Knights. So there was a yes on that front. Brayden McNabb was the first one. An obvious yes when it comes to that. And regardless if it's been Kaden Korczak, if it's been Shea Theodore, whatever pairing you put Brayden McNabb, let's just say for argument's sake, even put Zach Whitecloud and Brayden McNabb together, McNabb would find a way to make that work. So he's kind of the first obvious one there, Brayden McNabb. And I'm not just saying this because your host, Ian Kelly, his favorite player just so happens to be Brayden McNabb. But bias aside and putting, favoritism aside, Brayden McNabb, with his age, with his experience, with his shot blocking, it was an obvious yes for the Vegas Golden Knights in terms of re-signing heading into next offseason. The second one, that no-brainer by the Vegas Golden Knights, had to be Brett Howden. Brett Howden is your utility belt with the Vegas Golden Knights. Regardless if he is on line 2, line 3, line 4, you put him at the center, you put him at the wing. Regardless of where you put Brett Howden, he was going to be a guy that you have to extend with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And overall, regardless of how much you have to pay a guy like Brett Howden, he was going to be worth every single cent for the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And it's just his, versatility that really shows off with the Vegas Golden Knights organization that makes him a valuable asset to this team. In a way, and stay with me here, in a way, it kind of reminds me a lot of, for example, a guy who is not here anymore, unfortunately, a guy who just left a while ago, and that was someone like Michael Amadio. Michael Amadio was a versatility guy who could play multiple lines if need be. Team player. That's the type of asset you need. And Brett Howden, once again, no-brainer with the Vegas Golden Knights. And then the last no-brainer for the Vegas Golden Knights. And regardless of how people feel about him defensively, regardless of the amount of people who go on this show and say that I dislike Shea Theodore, you can't deny that offensively, Shea Theodore is a massive asset to a team. You can't deny that when it comes to his defensive pairings, him and Brayden McNabb have been one of the most constant and consistent pairings the Vegas Golden Knights have had in franchise history. And when it comes to the contract that he had leading up into this, $5.25 million, he was going to clear that and then some with this extension with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, there was some conversation about would they wait until the actual offseason or would they get it done during the season? During the season, that was what the ended up, scenario was going to be. But overall, Shea Theodore was the last of the no-brainers with the Vegas Golden Knights, okay? So when we're talking about who should Vegas re-sign next season, the three no-brainers, the 100% absolutes, was defenseman Brayden McNabb, was center Brett Howden, and defenseman Shea Theodore. Okay? Now, let's get into what I'm going to call the most likely. All right? This is the 90% possibility. Okay? These are three players that, unless something majorly goes wrong, okay, unless there is something that just derails and goes completely haywire, this is the most likely option with your Vegas Golden Knights. And starting out with this, let's go with the goaltender, the guy that they gave a one-year deal this offseason, but will arguably be one of the best backup goaltenders in the NHL in terms of quality, and that is Ilya Samsonov. And when it comes to Ilya Samsonov, this is a goaltender that has pretty much prevailed in almost every position he has been, short-term or long-term. Starting out in Washington, he proved himself there. He established himself in Washington. He moves over to Toronto. He had some quality starts there, even made some good opportunities there in Toronto. Now in Vegas, Ilya Samsonov as a backup goaltender. And look, listen, I'm not saying that in terms of re-signing Ilya Samsonov that you're going to give him, $9 million, $10 million, $11 million. I'm not saying you're going to make him one of the highest paid goalies in the NHL. No. But when you look at Ilya Samsonov as a backup caliber goaltender, and at this stage in his career, that seems what he is at this point. If you're the Vegas Golden Knights and you head into next offseason, and if you compare the two goalies that you have right now, and you sit to yourself and say, which one is going to cost less, but could provide more value in the long run, Ilya Samsonov will be that goaltender. And let's also be honest. In terms of versatility, Ilya Samsonov does provide more than what Adin Hill has been in terms of staying on the ice, being healthy, being there out throughout an entire season. So, overall, Ilya Samsonov, most likely, Vegas will reward him with a 2-year deal this upcoming offseason. I will be very stunned if the Vegas Golden Knights turn away Samsonov as a backup option. Now, if he ends up wanting to be a starter somewhere else, if this turns into a Logan Thompson type situation from what we saw a while back, I will be saying, all right, he'll probably move on. But as a backup scenario, I will say most likely Ilya Samsonov will be a re-signing with the Vegas Golden Knights. And with the amount of money that he'll make as a backup goaltender, it will be a good value overall for the Vegas Golden Knights. So when we're talking about who Vegas could re-sign next offseason, Ilya Samsonov will be on that list, and he will be someone Vegas does bring back at a certain rate. Also when it came to Keegan Kolesar, most likely seemed like a good, cut deal right there. A team leader, someone who's been on that bottom six, can be a middle six forward if need be. But what I liked about Keegan Kolesar was that he ended up being someone that can provide leadership in that locker room. Keegan Kolesar has ended up being someone who, you see him during practice, he's the one passing the puck around to people. When you're seeing him doing warm-ups, he's passing the puck to multiple people. And you see him talking to his teammates. You see him in the locker room talking to multiple guys and being that leader. I mean, it's kind of interesting to look at Keegan Kolesar and say that he went from being that young, bright-eyed guy who was just, establishing himself a few years back to now being an established member of the organization. So Keegan Kolesar, just like, Braden McNabb, Brett Howden, Shea Theodore, really seems like this is the re-signing the Vegas Golden Knights were going to do, and that is the possibility there. Now, I talked about in the first two parts, okay? I talked about the no-brainers to the Vegas Golden Knights, the 100%ers, those ones are done. The second one was the most likely category, the guys that were most likely going to get brought back. And then I'm now talking about the 60-40 option, okay? These are guys that, depending on how they performed, depending on how they did, they were either going to get brought back at a certain rate or they are going to end up being moved on. Now, when I talk about this, two of them are restricted free agents, okay? They are young enough, and they are classified as restricted free agents. So when I say there's a 60-40 chance, I'm talking about, will the Vegas Golden Knights decide to bring them back, or will they non-tender them and make them a UFA? And the first one, and the obvious guy that's in this category, is defenseman Nicholas Hague. Now, people who have been watching Vegas Golden Knights hockey, you know about his size. It's actually one of the best assets that Nicholas Hague has. This is someone 6'6". This is a guy who stands right in front of the net. He tries helping out tries to help out the goaltending with Hill, with Samsonov. And more importantly, when it comes to Nicholas Hague, this is someone who came from the inaugural 2017 draft class. And interesting enough, is the mainstay from that 2017 draft class. The three guys drafted in front of him, Glass, Suzuki, and Brandstrom, no longer with Vegas. Hague is the last one standing there. And over these 7 years that you have seen him progress from being an AHLer to just getting his feet wet in the NHL to being a Stanley Cup champion and now being an everyday guy with the Vegas Golden Knights, he has become your steady rock on the third defensive pairing. And we even saw for a little bit him team up with Noah Hanifin, which I actually like seeing. And if it was my opinion, you would team him up even a little bit more. Because when Hanifin and Hague played towards the back end of last season, and we even saw a little bit this year, Nicholas Hague has ended up becoming a real good chemistry-wise with Noah Hanifin. I wish we would see more of that more often. But when it comes to Nicholas Hague, the reason why I'm leaning towards yes is because his performance backs up his RFA. If he was not contributing, I would lean towards him being let go because the Vegas Golden Knights have 9 defensemen that are going to be heading into next year. There's going to be 1 or 2 guys that are either going to be let go, they're going to be traded, or there's going to be a situation where they just get sent right back down to the minors and they're forced to be in there for a while. But with Nicholas Hague, he will be a guy that will end up being an everyday with the NHL and with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. So overall, when it comes to a guy like Nicholas Hague, yes, you could trade him. All right, you could trade him. You could upgrade the forward line. But then the issue is going to be when you have those defensemen. All right, you have Pietrangelo, Hanifin. We talked about McNabb. We talked about Theodore earlier. So if you trade Hague, let's just talk about it. Are you going to have Korzak be an everyday defenseman? Are you going to have Whitecloud? Is it going to be Hutton? Is there some defensemen down in the minors that you think might get brought up and then replace him as an everyday guy? Because Vegas Golden Knights having 8 defensemen has kind of been the mainstay overall. When it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights having 8 defensemen there, you trade one of them, that does free it up. But when you have him be on the defensive side, his size and his ability to be an everyday guy, I actually believe that's the reason why you bring him back when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights. And this one, when I put in the 60-40 category, now he is not in the NHL. I'm going to clarify this. The person I'm about to say next is not in the NHL. He's a prospect. But since he was a 2020 second-round pick, he is a reason why I'm putting him on here. He is an RFA, and that is defenseman Lucas Cormier. And Lucas Cormier, he is a prospect right now. He's with the Henderson Silver Knights, been there the last couple of years. And the reason why I'm putting a yes to Lucas Cormier as an RFA is because he has the ability to continue to progress with the Henderson Silver Knights. Now, I am not saying you sign him to a mega deal at the NHL level, but I say that you sign him to a 2-year deal on a $700,000, $800,000 deal. Allow him to continue to progress in the AHL, and then if injuries bound to happen, you call him up to the NHL like what happened last year. So, overall, when we're talking about who Vegas should sign next offseason, 2025 is what we're looking forward to. Nicholas Hague, Lucas Cormier, there's possibility there. But what about extensions? Because these two guys I'm about to bring up are in the 50-50 category. All right? These are two guys that are a possibility of them just playing out the remainder of their deal. They're going to stay where they are right now. Or the Vegas Golden Knights pull the trigger and they give them their extension 1 year early. And the two guys that I'm mentioning, the first one and the biggest one in this conversation is Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel, $10 million man, and he will be on the final year of his contract that he signed with the Buffalo Sabres all those years ago. He's still on that deal that when Vegas acquired him, they knew how many years he had left on that deal. And with how brilliantly Jack Eichel has performed with the Vegas Golden Knights and how of an elite player he has been the last couple of years, it doesn't escape the realm of possibility that your Vegas Golden Knights find a way to give him that extension. But the question's going to be, how many years versus how much money is Jack Eichel going to have? If you're the Vegas Golden Knights, and I'm putting you in Kelly McCrimmon's shoes, how much money are you giving Jack Eichel per year? Because you're clearly going to go past what Alex Pietrangelo has been making in terms of salary. But when you go with Jack Eichel, are you putting him at the $13 million? Are you putting him at $14 million? Is he going to be one of the top 15 paid players in the NHL? So with Jack Eichel, there is a realm of possibility that they end up giving him that extension and essentially allow him to not have just that 1 year window, and they make him the highest paid player on the Vegas Golden Knights and one of the highest paid players in the NHL in terms of top 10, top 15, top 20. So that's the first one. And the second one, and I'm smiling because I see the comments, well, this person must have read my script, because the second guy I have at 50-50 is Pavel Dorofeyev. Pavel Dorofeyev, based off of what we saw this past season, what we're seeing this season, Pavel Dorofeyev deserves a contract extension by the Vegas Golden Knights. With how well he has progressed, starting from when he was in Henderson, getting his feet wet in the NHL, now becoming a mainstay on that middle six, then becoming a top six mainstay with the Vegas Golden Knights. If you're McCrimmon, if you're McPhee, how do you not give an extension to Pavel Dorofeyev? Take advantage of the opportunity you have right now and give him a deal that would actually kind of be a friendly deal when it comes to the team. For comparison, when you remember Shea Theodore, back in 2019, back in 2018, the Vegas Golden Knights gave Shea Theodore, at the time, a team-friendly deal and helped them out in the long run when his deal finally got to where it is now. So, for Pavel Dorofeyev, that contract extension should be done with the Vegas Golden Knights. But once again, it's 50-50. Just like with Jack Eichel, it is a 50-50 on if they give him a contract extension. If you're asking me, you extend him in the 2025 offseason. You don't even give him a chance to become that, free agent possibility in 2026. So, overall, that is the two guys on 50-50 that I look at with your Vegas Golden Knights. And we're talking about who should be re-signed with the Vegas Golden Knights next offseason. I mentioned Ilya Samsonov for all the new people who are watching all around the world. I made my argument for why Ilya Samsonov should be brought back as a backup goaltender with the Vegas Golden Knights. Not as a starter, but as a backup, he should be brought back. I made an argument for why Nicholas Hague, as an RFA, as a kind of a 60-40 option there's a good chance Vegas, they should bring him back. As a prospect, bringing him back on that type of level, Lucas Cormier, I'm not done with him yet. I think he still has a lot of potential. And then we just recently, on the 50-50 side of it, talked about Jack Eichel and his contract extension, cutting him off 1 year early and giving him his long-term deal, not allowing him to become a UFA. And then Pavel Dorofeyev with his extension, not allowing him to be that RFA next year, but instead giving him a deal 1 year early. Now, the next two players, I am putting on the 40-60 mark. All right, 40%, they come back. 60%, they don't come back. And this one's going to be controversial, I know for sure. But Adin Hill, I'm not bringing back for a certain amount of money. Okay? Now, if he wants to come back at around $5 million, $6 million, if he wants to, do it around there, $6.5 million, I would say Adin Hill, you come back at that price. That does make a lot of sense. However, if Adin Hill, if his market value is around $7.5 million, $8 million, even $9 million for Adin Hill, if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, you have to stop and ask yourself, for that much amount of money, are you willing to give that to Adin Hill? As a starting goaltender, looking at his metrics that we have seen, is he worth $7.5 million, $8 million as a goaltender? So for the right price, that's why I'm doing 40-60 here. For the right price, Adin Hill, I say sure, bring him back. But if he exceeds a certain value, and by the way, considering what happens with the Four Nations face-off, that's going to, see what happens there. If Team Canada ends up doing anything with Adin Hill, we'll see how his value goes. And end of the year, come playoff time, if your Vegas Golden Knights end up making any run at all, that would also increase his value when it comes to Adin Hill. So next offseason, if his contract is like $5-6 million, I say yes, bring him back. But if it exceeds that and it goes anywhere near $8 to $9 million, I'm going to lean towards no for Adin Hill being brought back. And this next one, this one's kind of a similar situation. For Victor Olofsson, they brought him on that 1 year deal. they gave him a little over $1 million to be here, to be with Jack Eichel, to be on that line with him. But if he ends up being a guy that demands a couple of more $1 million, right? Let's say that, he comes back and he is, a $4 million, $5 million player, I'm going to lean towards no. And it's not just due to the injury concerns that we've seen with Victor Olofsson. It's not just the fact that we have seen him out there in Buffalo, we're going to see here in Vegas. This is going to be a guy that I really look at and go, unless he ends up still being at around maybe $2.5 million, $3 million there for next season, then I say maybe bring him back. But if he has, a situation where his contract demands way more than that, then that's on the 60% mark. I say you let Victor Olofsson go. And then the next one, and by the way, this guy definitely has my script because, yes, I'm going to be talking about these two right now. These two are RFAs. And I am putting them on the 25-75% mark. Okay? These two, I say 25% bring them back, 75% let them go. And the first one is a former first-round pick, and that is Brendan Brisson. This is an RFA. He was a first-round pick in 2020. But my issue with Brendan Brisson is the fact that when you see him play, regardless if it's in the NHL, regardless if it's in the AHL, I've seen him at both, I don't see a complete player with Brendan Brisson. I do not see a guy that is going to be an everyday NHLer despite being that first-round pick label. So if this is a guy who I really look at and say that he can really play somewhere else, go ahead and do it. But with the Vegas Golden Knights, I do not see him being a bottom six forward playing every single day. I do not see him being a middle six forward who's going to play almost every day in Vegas. And if he was going to be that guy, he would have shown it by now. In a weird way, I kind of compare him to Cody Glass. Cody Glass was a guy who he'd play, periodically, but we never saw a full 82-game season from Cody Glass, and that made him expendable. They moved on from him. And Brendan Brisson, I kind of look at that way. You can move on from him, and I think that it would, in the long run, would end up working for the Vegas Golden Knights. And now 25-75, Alexander Holtz. I mean, geez, this is a guy that, regardless of what line you put him on, could be, experimenting on the first line, second line, third line, fourth line, make him a healthy scratch. You send him down to Henderson. You call him up from Henderson. It just seems like Alexander Holtz doesn't fit with the Vegas Golden Knights. Regardless of where you put him, what lines you put him on, what chemistry you try to build, Alexander Holtz, weirdly enough, kind of has the same problem that we've seen with other top 10 picks, is that they just don't gel anywhere. And when they don't gel on a certain line, eventually you're going to move on from them. And this is a Vegas Golden Knights team that, let's just think about it. They pretty much gave up a mid-level pick, and then you had the goaltender, Kira Schmid, and Paul Cotter. You essentially swapped. So it was Paul Cotter and a mid-level draft pick, and the Vegas Golden Knights got back a goaltender in the AHL, and they got back Alexander Holtz. So overall, I'm going to lean on towards no for Alexander Holtz being a RFA. They're not going to bring him back, and they will just have him be a UFA, and he'll go sign somewhere else. And by the way, for the AHL, I'm not going to cover these guys. I know they're going to be free agents. Mason Morelli, Giannis Roundbeer, Cal Burke, Gage Quinney. Like, these guys are in the AHL, but these guys are not NHL-type contracts. Gregory Diansenko, I know he's in a group UF6. Roundbeer's in a group UF6. But when it comes to the AHL, I just don't want to cover them in that much depth, whereas I did for everybody else. So this was our video here on Vegas Hockey Hub with your host, Ian Rakelli, talking about who Vegas should re-sign next offseason. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can. That would help us out greatly. And subscribe to all of our content. We are on all major social media platforms all around the world. And until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli, and go Knights, go!
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.